Hello and welcome back. And there's something I'd like to talk about today, especially for those of you who watched my last video about letting go of control and perhaps thought, well, that's all really good, but what about when things are really hard and you're in something quite painful or uncertain or something that's quite fearful? And often when those situations arise, we find that our urge to control gets the loudest, the strongest, and really kind of pushes us to start to gain some control within that situation. And this is where the deeper work begins, and you'll have already done this many times as you've been on this awakened journey for a while. And as you know, when we go through something difficult, whether it's loss or some sort of trauma, or it's a betrayal or a life situation that just feels like completely out of your hands, or something that's just come in and sideswipe you that you couldn't possibly have seen coming, it leaves a mark when we go through something like that. And it doesn't mean physically it leaves a mark on the physical body, unless it's an accident, obviously, and then we do get physical injuries, but mainly in terms of an emotional sense or energetically within the actual body. And this can be likened to an inner wound, if you like. And that's the sort of thing that I work with on a daily basis with my one-to-one clients. And I work with that because I've obviously worked a lot on myself with my own inner wounding. But the truth that I see again and again in my work is that wound isn't permanent, and it doesn't need to be permanent. It doesn't need to become your identity. It can, just like when we have a physical injury, so say if we cut ourselves and the body there's a wound and then it creates a scab and eventually it heals, but then you might be left with a scar. It's the same energetically and within the body with things that happen to us on that sort of level. It's what I call a sacred scar. And it becomes a sacred scar when something is fully met, fully seen, fully honoured in the body, and the energy of that thing is fully alchemized, as in you have fully had your awareness on it and you have allowed that energy to move through you. So it then is able to heal. Until that point, until we allow that to happen and we stop resisting that process, it remains a wound that we keep kind of picking the scab off, if you like, every time that we go into that story and we feel that emotion, but we don't let it move through the body. We pick the scab off and then it just reopens that wound, and we just keep that happening. But when we do fully feel it and fully see it, fully honour and allow and acknowledge it, it moves, it releases. And then what we've got left is the memory. But it is the memory of what happened, but without the pain attached to it when you remember it. Just like a scar on the skin, when you see that scar somewhere on your body, you can remember why you had that scar, probably, what you did, when you fell off your bike when you were 10 or whatever. And it brings up the memory, but there is no emotional charge when you think about what happened, because that wound is healed and it doesn't hurt anymore. You can just see it, and that scene of it reminds you that it happened. So this is like exactly what I guide people through in my sessions. We don't just talk about what happened endlessly, because when we do this, as I've spoken about before, I see it as a glass of water with mud at the bottom, and all we do is just stir up that mud in the session, and then at the end of the session they leave and that mud settles again, and then they come back 1-2 weeks later and we stir it up again. So when we go into the body, into the feeling, and we allow that density, that ice cube of emotion, of stored emotion, to be fully experienced, and you're guided through that process, the body then does what it's totally designed to do, which is to let go. Let's go of that energy, because it is designed to move. That's what it wants to do, but we just prevent that from happening with our resistance to doing that. So if you are in something difficult right now, I just want to offer you a different perspective. And it's not to belittle or make it sound like your experience was not valid or traumatic or difficult at all, but it's meant to support you through that in order to come out of the other side free of the energy of that. Because always there is a part of you, if you, your soul, if you like, your higher self, your higher intelligence, that knows what you're ready for. So there might be, you might think, why did this come into my life? Am I being punished or anything like that? But actually there is a higher intelligence at work. And if you're somebody who's chosen to awaken in this lifetime, in this reality, in this world, then you are going to be faced with challenging things to release what you are not. So this higher intelligence that is you, it knows what you're ready for, and it knows where going through this is leading you, and you are always held. So again, even in the midst of the most challenging and difficult situation, it is about releasing control. There is no situation I can think about where control actually helps the situation, because this intelligence knows what you're moving through, and it knows where it's guiding you to, so it knows what's through the other side of that, the freedom that exists once you allow that to alchemize through you. And if you think about birds, especially eagles, so the eagles hatched in the nest, and then they are there for, however long they're there. They're being fed every day. They feel really comfortable, secure, safe, and they're just really nurtured and looked after inside of the nest. But then there comes the day where it's time for them to learn how to fly. So from the eaglet's perspective, it might be terrifying because they don't know what's happening when they're just kind of pushed out of the nest by the parent, and they have just that sense of falling and probably panic. I mean, I don't know actually if birds do have that panic, but if you just imagine it as the same sort of thing. But as they fall, something kicks in that they didn't know that they had the ability to do. And that instinct, that knowing, in that moment, exactly the right time, they spread their wings and they fly. And it's a new discovery. And it's like, wow, this is what we can do. But you can imagine that in terms of our own life, there are situations that come up, we think there is absolutely no way I can get through this and I can come out the other side. It's totally destabilised me, and I just feel like there's no way I can get over this, a loss of a loved one or whatever it is. But the more that we can just surrender into that process, that ability will kick in, where we discover that we can fly. And it's not about denying what happened, but it's about transcendence through what happened. And obviously life does that to us. It's part of the process. It's part of what we signed up to do. And it really pushes us out of what's known and what's comfortable into the unknown. And in that scenario, the mind will panic, and the mind will try to grab hold, and it will go back to past experiences. It will try to control, it will try to fix, and it will try to force an outcome that feels safe. But as you've probably gone through something like this before, the invitation is always, as I spoke about yesterday, letting go of those oars of that canoe whilst on the river. Because when we grip tightly and we are trying to paddle upstream and try to control what's happening, the outcome, who's going to say what, do what, however you're going to be in that situation, this is what creates the suffering. Because we're resisting what is, and we stay stuck in that wounding. So again, the invitation, even with something quite challenging, even when the urge to control is more severe, it is to soften, to allow, and to trust that we are held and that we are always supported, and there is a higher intelligence always guiding us. And when we can do that, something shifts. The river then just begins to carry you effortlessly. And that river is your life, it's your soul, It knows where you're going. And even when your mind doesn't have a clue, this higher intelligence does. So we can just calm down the mind, calm down the nervous system, and just know that we are held, we are safe. So if you are in a difficult place right now with something quite challenging, instead of asking, how do I control this? You could gently ask, what is this here to show me? You can just see if you can just allow the uncomfortable feeling to be there just for a moment to start with. Just be fully in acceptance of what is. And then maybe you can ask, can I trust that there is something within me that knows the way? And as I've spoken about in the last few videos, at this point, it is really important to just take a breath and drop in from the mind into the heart space. And no matter what is happening externally to you, when you do this, there just is that sense of peace and calm. This higher intelligence knows that you are safe. It's almost like the center of the tornado, the still point. So just know that your greatest challenges, as you probably already know because you've been through many, are not punishments. They are initiations, and we chose to awaken to who we truly are in this lifetime. And so we are going to have these things to butt up against in order to discover that. But on the other side of you, of that event or incident, is always a version of you that's stronger, that's wiser, more compassionate, more powerful, and more able to come from the heart space. And it's incremental because it was all done, immediately, and we went from really unawake to completely awake. That probably would be too much for our physical bodies, our nervous systems. But every time you go through one of those incremental little shifts, you are more than you've ever been before, and you're more confidently, more able to operate more deeply from that heart space than you were before. And every time we alchemize this and we allow that energy to move through us, that wounding that happened to us becomes the scar. It heals, and then that scar becomes the wisdom. And from that wisdom, we are able to help others, to teach others, to share that wisdom. That's what it's for. And then you become that healer. Whether you actually become a healer or you just are able to embody that energy within your life, and everybody you come across with feels that within you, you are that healer. So for now, you don't need to have all the answers if you're going through something difficult. You can just come back to this moment, back to breathing, dropping into the heart space. Feel that calm, peaceful space there. Let go of those oars of control and just allow life to carry you, knowing that higher intelligence is supporting and guiding you and is always there. You just need to know how to allow that to work through you. And you are exactly where you are meant to be. So I hope that really helps someone today. I'd love to hear in the comments if you're going through something difficult, or if you'd just like to let me know where you are from. And yeah, have a beautiful Thursday. That's how it is today. It's a sunny day in the UK, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for listening.